In BMW's North American lineup, there are certainly a plethora of crossovers to choose from the entry-level X1 all the way up to the gargantuan 3-row X7, there's basically a BMW SUV for every specific need. Now, BMW makes it especially confusing because when you see an odd number after the X, it signifies a more traditional shape, whereas now if you see an even number, it's supposed to represent a coupe-ified version of that specific crossover. Which brings me to this 2020 BMW X2 that I'm showing you today, the newest member of their coupe-ified SUV lineup. This is supposed to represent a more sleeker version of the entry-level X1, and just like that vehicle, it is based off of the Mini Countryman platform, which makes it a front-wheel drive BMW, the first time that we're seeing one here in the States. Now, this specific one is a more special X2 because this is called the X2 M35i, and what makes it so special is the fact that this has the most powerful production four-cylinder that BMW has ever produced. This is a 2-liter four-cylinder with up to 302 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. So the big question I want to answer is, if you guys are looking for a replacement for your aging hot hatch, should you put this all-new 2020 BMW X2 M35i at the top of your list? That's what we're here to find out. Hey guys, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Shine Armor. Now, I've been making videos on cars on YouTube for the better part of 7 years now, and one of the constant struggles that I deal with is trying to keep the cars clean in between the shoots, especially here in the DC area where it's fall, it constantly rains, it constantly snows. The cars definitely don't always stay as clean as you see them in the videos, and sometimes they are a little bit dirty, and you guys have definitely let me know when they aren't as clean as they should be. Now, to help me with keeping the cars clean, Shine Armor wanted me to show you the product that I constantly use in between the shoots. This is called the Fortify Quick Coat, and it's essentially a beefed up spray detailer that has some ceramic coating in it. Now, ceramic coating is that stuff that dealers typically charge you $1,000 for to have your car coated with, so you no longer have to wash and wax it. Now, this stuff here is really great because it's a quick detailer that you can use to clean up a car, to touch up a car in between washes, and it actually forms a protective coating to help keep it clean for months instead of days or weeks like typical spray detailers do. And Shine Armor says this stuff is formulated with a special emulsification process that actually will surround the dirt that's on the paint of the car and encapsulate it in liquid, so it safely allows you to remove the dirt, the loose dirt that's on the vehicle, with this stuff and with just a regular rag. I know a lot of you are worried, won't it scratch the paint if you're using it on a dirty car without actually washing it with water to remove the dirt first? Well, Shine Armor has a 30-day money-back guarantee, and I've been using this stuff for years. So as an example, here is my 2018 Tesla Model 3 Performance, and trust me, my spouse drives this thing to and from work every day, and it gets dirty. This is literally after about 2 weeks with the caked on dirt and nasty road debris all over the back of the bumper and on the rear trunk lid. All you have to do is take this stuff here, and Shine Armor says you need to spray it very liberally all over the paint. You need to get it very much soaked onto the paint. And then you'll just take a clean rag here, and you'll just kind of wipe away all the dirt. Now, typically, I would not trust a product like this without actually having to wash the vehicle first, because, again, some of you are wondering, what about scratches? Well, the beauty about this product is if you use it constantly, it always leaves a protective layer of film on it to prevent scratches, and it allows you to basically just lift off the dirt very quickly without having to use any water, because trust me, you don't always have time to take out the bucket and hose and wash the car completely. So as you can see, this is the dirty rag. The rag was clean before, and now it's covered in the dirt, and what you're left with is basically the shiny paint and no scratches on the back of the vehicle. So if you guys are interested in picking up a bottle, be sure to click on the BOGO link in the description below. Shine Armor is actually having a Black Friday and Cyber Monday deal right now where you can actually get up to 4 bottles for free, depending on how many you actually want to purchase using that special discount link. So even though this is an X2, I like to think of this thing more as a hot hatch, simply because when you look underneath the hood, This has, again, as I said, the most powerful production four-cylinder that BMW has ever produced. This is the all-new 2-liter B48 four-cylinder, but basically the wick turned up. It's got more turbo boost, it's got redesigned internals, and this 2-liter pumps out 302 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. Now, as most of you guys know, BMW tends to underrate their engines, and when we go into the test drive, I'll talk about how this thing feels like it's making more around 330 horsepower. Now, this motor is also going to find its way underneath the 2020 Mini Cooper Countryman John Cooper Works, which is going to be a really nice addition to the Mini lineup. But in this application, it should be good for 0 to 60 in around 4.7 seconds. BMW also says you'll reach a top speed of 155 miles per hour. Now, those of you who are looking to replace your hot hatch, I'm sorry, there is no manual transmission available. Instead, your only transmission option is an 8-speed ASIN automatic transmission, so it's a torque converter automatic with launch control. And BMW says you should be getting around 23 in the city, 29 on the highway, which is actually pretty good. Please be sure to put premium gas in this thing. As this one sits, it weighs around 3,700 pounds. Now, looking at the design of the X2 M35i, you can see it has a lot of traditional styling elements that we know and love with a lot of BMW products. Compared to the X1, which shares a platform with this vehicle, BMW definitely gave it its own unique design. Although BMW also refreshed the X1 for 2020, this one has more of the older front fascia, so it doesn't look a lot like the X3 or X5 that I've shown you guys in my other videos. These full LED headlights are going to be standard on the M35i version. They have the usual LED daytime running lights, you have LED turn signals in the front, you have LED fog lights down here, and then because this one's the M35i model, you have more aggressive front air intakes. You have a unique front fascia, you have this satin chrome finish on the grille on the lower part of the front fascia, and overall, let me know what you think in the comments. I really think this is a good looking SUV, and I love the fact that it's so low and planted. It's actually 3 inches lower than the X2 to give it, again, a more squat down appearance, because this is supposed to be the coupe-ified version of this car. Now, when this car came out in 2018, it wasn't technically the first front-wheel drive application of a BMW in North America. That distinction belongs to the X1, which came out about 2 years earlier. But as you can see, unlike the X4 and X6, it doesn't have that squatted down rear roof like you see in those vehicles where it kind of has that hunchback look. Instead, BMW just lowered the roof line by 3 inches, made it more traditional looking, but kind of like a coupe. And they also shortened the overall length by 3 inches compared to the X1. At 172 inches long, this is basically on the smaller end. It shares the same 105-inch wheelbase as the Mini Countryman and, of course, the BMW X1. Now, my specific tester has this really attractive set of 20-inch wheels. It's just a $600 option. It includes the M Sport brakes that you get on this particular one here. The wheels are wrapped in 225 series tires, so these are an all-season Pirelli. I believe you can also get a summer tire on this car, depending on where you live, but I think the wheels, the Alpine white exterior color and that orange interior, it's a really great looking combination that makes this thing really stand out. Again, from this angle, you can really tell this looks more like a hot hatch. Now, my tester here has a panoramic sunroof for $1,350. I kind of wish BMW made it standard. Some competitors like the Audi Q3 do make something like that standard. And then when you come over to the rear quarter panel area here, I'm not sure why there's another BMW badge here on the D pillar. I just don't think it was necessary. I think BMW is trying to remind people this is a BMW, because some people may confuse this thing for a hot hatch or maybe even like a Hyundai or Kia product. Now, looking at the rear of this vehicle, you can see the design is also equally tasteful, especially because it doesn't have that squatted down roofline area. You can really see the BMW traditional design elements here. The taillights are actually a combination of LEDs and incandescent. The turn signal is incandescent, the reverse light is incandescent, but the brake lights are LED. Down here you can see the twin outlet exhaust. They look fantastic and they also sound fantastic. I'll let you take a listen of this motor real quick. Heard, I really wasn't expecting the crackles and the pops. It's just a really mean sound that I really wasn't expecting, because if you drive the 28i version of this car, it just sounds really plain Jane compared to this specific model. Now, looking at the trunk capacity, this is supposed to be an SUV, but BMW did, of course, have to reduce the cargo capacity of this particular one compared to the X1. You're still looking at around 21 cubic feet of space. That's a reduction of about 6 cubic feet versus the X1, which already had a lot of space for the segment. Fold down those second row seats and you get around about 49 cubic feet of space. So again, that's a reduction of about 8 cubic feet. Still very competitive. This is about the same amount of space you're gonna get from something like a Volkswagen Golf R or a Honda Civic Type R. So if you still don't believe me when I tell you that the X2 is more of a hot hatch and less like a crossover, let's hop into the interior of this particular one and see some of the changes that BMW has made. Now here is the smart key access system with intelligent key. This comes with the premium package that my tester has. You can see this is the current BMW key fob. It doesn't have that feature where you can walk away and it'll automatically lock and unlock the door as you approach it without actually having to touch the door handle. That's what they say for the newer BMW products. But like everything else that BMW does, there is a sensor here on the two front door handles. You just touch your finger over there, that'll lock the doors. The mirrors do not electrically fold in. They do have a feature where you can power fold them in, but they don't do it when you actually are locking the car. I couldn't find it in the settings. To unlock it, just touch the back of the door handle and that will unlock the door for you. Now, look at this really bright interior. Some of you may think it's a red interior. BMW calls it magma red, but it's definitely an orange in this particular light. It looks phenomenal with the Alpine white exterior color. This magma red orange interior is a little bright for some, but I actually really like it. I love the big pop of color. You can see there is some nice LED lighting accenting underneath the dark piano black trim here. It's accented throughout the interior. You can change this color to like 7 different hues. You have the red splashed throughout the dash, throughout the door panels. The seats, as you can see, these sport seats look fantastic and they're also extremely comfortable. They adjust in like 15 or 16 different ways. The headrest, as you can see, non-adjustable, but you can adjust this bolstering to squeeze you or hug you a little bit more. There's also a manual thigh extender here. There's 2-person memory seats. The seats themselves are only heated. BMW doesn't offer a cooled seat on this particular one, but as you saw, the 2-person memory is nice. You have to step up to their more expensive models to get the cooled seats. The steering wheel looks like it comes directly off of the M2 competition. It's a really nice, more old school, chunky looking steering wheel. This thing just really looks like a performance car, not an SUV at all. And then in fact, when you get into the car, it has such a low step-in height. Again, I feel like I'm getting into a hatch. This feels lower than most of the X2's competition, and I believe the M35i is slightly lower than the regular xDrive 28i. Now shutting the door, typical German car solid thunk, so that really adds to the impression of quality. And when you want to start the car up, you guys know how to start up most modern cars. Just put your foot on the brake, push this button here to fire up the engine. And this thing actually has a nice little burble and pop from the exhaust. Let me show you guys that again really quick. This is seriously just a 4-cylinder. I am dumbfounded. I am just in awe because this is BMW's most powerful production 4-cylinder, as I said. So really looking forward to driving this thing, and I can't really say that about most of these little small SUVs. Now, looking at the rest of this cabin, you can see I really like the design. It's a little bit more of an old school design versus the newer BMWs. You don't have their new BMW personal assistant, so you can't say things like, hey, BMW, find me the nearest Starbucks. It doesn't have that. It also doesn't have their gimmicky gesture controls. This one doesn't have that. As you can see, there's no additional black area there for the sensors. The gauges also, I also really appreciate these gauges. They're an all-digital display, as you can see, but they look like analog gauges. The only downside with it being an older design is you can't customize the inner workings of the gauge display like you can in some of the competitors or the newer BMW system, which isn't still as good as what you get from the competition. Now, my tester here has this optional, $1,500 Dakota leather upgrade package, and you can see it's genuine leather and stitching on the dashboard, on this lower part of the center console. There's some faux stitching here on the upper part of the dash, but it is a soft touch injection molded material. Same thing with the door panel here. There's that piano black plastic trim with a real aluminum door handle. The windows are one-touch automatic for both front and for the rear, so it's all 4 one-touch, and they have a typical solid feel with the door window switches. You can see pushing that button there, that will fold in the mirrors electrically, but I couldn't find in the settings to actually make it fold all the time while I was whenever I lock and unlock the car. Down here, it is hard touch plastic. Remember, this is their least expensive BMW model. There's some headlight control switches over there, your fog light, your dimmer switches over there. Nice little hidden storage area over there, which is actually quite large, which is nice. The steering wheel, as you can see, it is a manual tilt telescoping, and the little lever for it is over here. Pull that lever, you can see it offers a pretty good amount of adjustability, so shorter drivers or taller drivers, you should be able to get comfortable, although the headroom in here is a little bit on the tighter side. The steering wheel itself, love the design. I mean, it's got the M emblem right there at the bottom. It's really fat, feels good in your hands. It's got these steering wheel mounted paddles. You have your cruise control switches. This one here has the adaptive cruise with stop and go. You can adjust the volume over here, activate the Bluetooth. No actual radio skip track next button here on the steering wheel, which is kind of frustratingly missing. But again, some of you may not actually care. Looking at the center stack here, very traditional with the actual volume knob over here, although it's kind of like an Audi and Volkswagen product, how that doesn't stay still. That kind of will annoy somebody who's OCD. Your radio preset buttons, an actual CD player, as you can see, and then you have dual zone climate control with the 3-level heated seats. No room for cooled seats, as I said, on this particular one, and no heated steering wheel. If you guys want a heated steering wheel, you cannot get the adaptive cruise control option like my Tester has. When you guys get the adaptive cruise, BMW deletes the heated steering wheel button, which is annoying, and also no blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert. That's not available on the X2 at any price, which I imagine BMW will rectify that whenever they refresh this thing in the coming years. Now, this one here has the optional 8.8-inch upgraded iDrive head unit. The standard size is a small 6.5-inch screen, and to be honest, this 8.8-inch looks a little bit small. This is basically the same system that you get in the older BMWs, and the Toyota Supra uses this. As you can see, I've got the wireless Apple CarPlay right now, which is activated. It does annoyingly not take up the entire screen. The newer BMWs will do that for you, so I don't know why they don't allow you to take up the entire screen. For example, if you pull up Google Maps or Waze, for example, it does not take up the entire screen, which is very frustrating. If you want to hit the menu button here, you can see there's your usual iDrive sources and whatnot. If you do want to take up the full screen with GPS, again, you kind of have to go to the embedded navigation system, which looks okay. It's definitely not, the top in terms of graphics, like you can look at Audi or Porsche, or even Mercedes has a really good system, but this is still relatively nice and easy to use. Communication is your phone, media sources are usual. You can see that's how you get to the Apple CarPlay. This is also a touchscreen if you guys don't want to use the iDrive controller, which also gives you a bunch of shortcut buttons over there. If you go to My Vehicle, this is where you access all the settings. This is where you can, for example, change the interior lighting. Going over here to your vehicle settings, you can go to lighting. That'll change the interior lighting. I actually really like it on the orange, but love how BMW gives you this customization. The interior looks phenomenal here at night, which is really nice. When you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it gives you a reverse camera with front and rear parking sensors. No top-down 360 camera, though. I don't believe that's available. The camera itself has decent resolution, but it's a very distorted image, and I just hate how it doesn't take up the entire screen. So remember, this is the less expensive BMW, so it's got the slightly older head unit. BMW has a better one in their newer products. Now over here, the gear shifter, if you guys go for an xDrive 28i, you actually have a traditional gear shifter, which has a cable linkage. This is the electronic shifter that you get with the M35i. So you have to push this unlock button here, push it all the way forward for reverse, kick it back once to go into neutral, and then pull it back again for drive. It goes into a sport mode over there, and then park is that P button over there. This also adjusts the drive mode selector. You can go between comfort, eco, pro, and then sport. The exhaust system actually does get quieter or louder based on what mode you're in. Cup holders are over here, some additional storage. Your USB is over there. You have electronic parking brake. And then over here you can see there is some nice storage in there, and then a nice little storage area over there. There's a USB-C port. If you guys are looking for a wireless charger, it's an option. If you guys get it for 500 bucks, it'll be in that little slot for your phone where you can put the wireless charger. Over here on the glove compartment, you can see it's actually a really big size. It's stamped, lined with felt. It's lit up. The seats, I find them to be very comfortable, and I think they fit me well, but just keep in mind, if you guys are a little bit wider frame, they may hug you a little bit too much. And then above you, you can see this panoramic sunroof is like 1,300 bucks extra. It lets in a lot of light. It looks great. This interior for me, works really well. The Harman Kardon sound system for $875 also works well. It is missing blind spot monitoring, which is annoying. And then if you guys are looking for the absolute newest head unit, remember this has the older system, but I think a lot of people are going to find a lot to like with this cabin. It gives you more of that old school BMW feel. Now hopping into the back seat of the X2, this is where you're going to see this car's smaller proportions really come into play, because BMW says you get around 35.7 inches of legroom, which is about the same as you get in the X1, but because the roofline has been lowered, there is less headroom. I'm only 5'7", so I'm short, and my head is pretty close to the ceiling. This panoramic sunroof eats up some space. The floor here isn't even completely flat, which is annoying because this is a front drive chassis, although this one here, of course, is equipped with their xDrive all-wheel drive. You do have 2 rear seat air vents. You have 2 USB charging ports here, which is nice, and then you also have 2 mat pockets. So as you can see, the amount of convenience and tech is actually not bad. Now, Now the materials are also soft touch. You have the same leather stitching throughout. You have the nice Harman Kardon speakers. And then if you fold down the armrest here, you can see BMW gives you 2 cup holders, so there is still a decent amount of storage. So the last time I drove an SUV that felt more like a hot hatch, it was probably about 5 years ago when Mercedes-Benz had sent me the GLA 45 AMG. And that car was basically, again, a hot hatchback in disguise. It had 375 or 355 horsepower from its 2-liter turbo 4. This X2 reminds me of that car so much because it sits very low. The seats are very aggressive. The car just has an amazingly planted feel. Kind of like if you guys are looking to replace your Focus RS, this car gives you a lot of the character and feel of the RS, but in a much more mature, much more livable package, a more luxurious interior. Now, the ride quality was kind of an issue with that Mercedes AMG GLA 45, and the X2 M35i, as you can see with the 20-inch wheels, it has a bumpy ride quality. I have it in its comfort setting right now. This is a really bumpy road that I typically will test ride quality on, and this is a firm ride. It's not as harsh as the Subaru STI S209 that I drove a couple weeks ago, or a month ago, or the Mercedes-Benz, or something like a Focus RS. But if you guys are looking for a cushy ride quality, this is not the one you're going to want to get. You're going to want to get the xDrive 28i or get the new Audi Q3. Audi does not have an SQ3 available yet in the States, but it's not horrible to live with. It's just if you guys aren't used to a firmer ride, you're gonna not like the way it actually rides. But getting out on the smoother pavements, you can see the ride quality settles down. It's firm, yet you can kind of tell this thing means business, not just from the exhaust noise. But you guys are probably curious, this is the first time I'm showing you a front-wheel drive based BMW, so let's try out the launch control. This has an Aisin built 8-speed automatic torque converter automatic. It does have launch control. To activate launch control, you put the transmission to sport, you just turn off the traction control and then just floor the brake and hit the brake and floor the accelerator. Ooh! Oh my God! This thing definitely feels like it has more than 302 horsepower. BMWs tend to underrate their engines, and this thing feels like it's pushing more like 330, 340 horsepower. BMW says you'll get to 60 in about 4.7 seconds, and you'll reach a top speed of 155 miles an hour with this thing. And listen to the noise this thing makes. Holy crap. Oh. BMW does really good engines. Their 6 cylinders are just a joy. Their 8 cylinders, super smooth. Their 4 cylinders have sounded like diesels in the past. I wasn't really the biggest fan of the 4s. I really didn't like the way the 4 cylinders sounded in the current generation 330i that I last showed you guys. But this 4-cylinder is done right. BMW did a really great job with the sound. It has a very nice visceral tone. It revs quickly. It's relatively smooth, and the exhaust noise. They really got the exhaust noise right with this thing too. Now, I do notice there is a slight delay when you guys don't use the launch control. It just takes a second for the turbos to spool up, for the transmission to put you in the right gear. So here, I'm not going to use the launch control. Let's see what it's like. Slight delay, but then it goes like bonkers. Holy crap. If BMW ever decides to do a full-on M version of this car, they have my blessing, because this thing feels like an M car, even though it's not technically a full-on M. It's an M35i, but it gives you the kind of character and feel you expect from an M, and it gives you the performance that you used to get in a 335i, from just 5-10 years ago. This is just one incredibly fast car. Now, it's not just fast in a straight line. When you find your favorite back road and start attacking some corners, the steering in this car isn't quite as heavy as I would like it to be, but it is better than the last new 3 Series that I drove. It talks to you a little bit. It has decent heft to it. It could be a little bit heavier. The suspension just stays incredibly flat. There is barely any body roll in this thing. It just feels like I'm driving a hot hatch. Like, this thing is an SUV, like BMW likes to call it. It doesn't feel like an SUV from behind the road, from this thick steering wheel to the way it just takes corners in this thing. It just kind of pushes you to be more aggressive. It pushes you to be naughty in this thing, like a hot hatch should. And I would love to take this thing out to a track. It's such a joy to drive. And it's also one of the first BMWs to have a limited slip front differential. So when you are flooring this car, it's xDrive all-wheel drive, but you don't feel any torque steer. You can actually feel it trying to appropriate the power to the correct wheels when you guys floor this thing into corners. It's just an incredibly planted car. I think a lot of people are going to be super surprised whenever they do drive this thing. Now, coming up here on some slower traffic, let's go over to comfort mode. Holy crap, this Mercedes is going so slow. Visibility in this car is not super great. The view out of the back is just garbage. It becomes that small window at the back and then that sloping design. The side mirrors are a good size. The view out of the front is okay, but where's the blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert? But when you put it back into its comfort mode here, the exhaust gets a little bit quieter. The steering gets a little bit lighter. The suspension also gets a little bit softer. But just keep in mind, if you guys really want a softer ride, don't get these optional 20-inch wheels. They do make the ride a little bit more harsh. But you know, you could easily daily drive this thing, and that's something that you struggle to do in a Focus RS. I mean, you can do it, but most of you probably wouldn't be comfortable, especially if you're over 30 years old. You're probably going to notice your spouse is complaining that the ride quality is too harsh, the seats are too constricting, and it's just too damn noisy on the inside. But overall, the driving dynamics of this 2020 X2 M35i really did shock me. It is basically a hot hatch in disguise. And for those of you who are lucky enough to actually check one out, looking for a replacement for your old, Focus RS or Subaru STI or Civic Type R, this is definitely going to fit the bill. So as most of you know, typically I'm not the biggest fan of the entry-level subcompact CUV segment, simply because for a little bit more money, I think you could just get a bigger SUV that is more functional and easier to live with on a day-to-day basis. Now that being said, I have to admit, I was pleasantly surprised with the way the X2 M35i drives, simply because this thing just reminds me more of a hot hatch. From the rowdy exhaust noise to that quick shifting transmission to the way this thing steers, the way it handles, and even though the ride quality is a little bit rough, those of you who are coming from something like a Focus RS, a Subaru STI, or a Volkswagen Golf R will find the ride quality to be agreeable. This is basically a much more mature, slightly more luxurious replacement for your hot hatch, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of enthusiasts who are looking in this segment for looking for something a little bit more nice. Just keep in mind, if you want an SUV that's actually more practical, you're going to want to go with something a little bit bigger. Perhaps even a BMW's X3 M40i would also be a nice, interesting choice. Now with that being said, it's time to give the 2020 X2 M35i an RPM rating. Now of course, this is a small SUV, so starting with the R in real world usage, obviously this is a small SUV, so I can't give it a higher rating like some of the bigger competitors. I'm going to give this thing a 6 out of 10 points simply because its back seat is kind of small, the trunk capacity is small, it's not really usable for somebody who's over 6 feet tall. Moving on to the E for efficiency, this is rated at 23 in the city, 29 in the highway. I actually averaged around 25 miles per gallon in my week's worth of testing. Keep in mind that's on premium gas. I'm going to give this thing a 7 out of 10 points for efficiency because it actually gets significantly decent gas mileage for what it is. Now moving on to the D for desirability, typically these small SUVs, I don't find them to be particularly desirable because of the way this thing sounds, the way it makes me feel. It's a very visceral, engaging car. I'll give this thing a 7 out of 10 points for desirability, only for the M35i version. I think BMW could really amp that up and offer this thing in a full-on X2 M version. Now moving on to the L for longevity, this is a BMW, and BMWs aren't typically known for reliability and really like longevity, vehicles that are going to last a long time without breaking, but you do get free maintenance for 3 years or 36,000 miles, and you also get their powertrain warranty for 4 years or 50,000 miles. I'll give this a 6 out of 10 points, which is basically the same that I'm going to rate most of the other German competitors. Moving on to the I for innovation, I'm going to give this thing a 7 out of 10 points for innovation, simply because there are some pretty cool features that BMW offers. I mean, this thing has heads-up display, it's got that trick limited slip front differential, it's got that new turbocharged 4-cylinder, which is the most powerful engine they've produced, so it does have some good tech. I'd give it more points if BMW would just offer this thing with blind spot monitoring, with rear cross traffic alert, which I imagine they may do whenever they refresh this thing, probably next year. Now moving on to the N for need for speed, this is where I'm going to give this thing an 8 out of 10 points because 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, which you can do repeatedly with the launch control. This is one fast SUV. It's faster than a Porsche Macan S, which is easily about $10,000 more. A Mercedes AMG GLA 45 does 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds, which is easily 15 grand more than this. So I'm going to give this thing an 8 out of 10 points for need for speed. Now, the last but not least, the final E for expense, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 points simply because it actually is a decent value. A regular X2 is only about $1,000 more than an X1, which starts around $36,500. Add $2,000 for all-wheel drive. This one here starts at $46,500 and it comes standard with all-wheel drive. That's actually a really good price considering some of you have paid in the $40,000 range for like something like a Focus RS, a Civic Type R, a Subaru STI, a Volkswagen Golf R can be close to $50,000 with all the options. Now, of course, my tester has several options on it, from the premium package to the sunroof, to the wheels, to the upgraded infotainment system on the inside, to the Harman Kardon sound. All in, my tester sticker is around $55,000, which is a lot of money, but keep in mind, if you want a Mercedes GLA 45, that's gonna be close to $70,000. If you're looking at a Porsche Macan, that's gonna be closer to $70,000 as well. So BMW has packed a lot of performance for not as much money as I thought they would charge. Now, add it all up, you get 47 out of 70 points, which makes this thing a little bit higher than the Range Rover Sport that I had last week. So again, the X2 was a huge surprise for me. So if you're looking for a hot hatch replacement, I should definitely recommend putting this one at the top of your list. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2020 BMW X2 M35i. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.